All right. So this is a very special episode, not only because it's the 100th episode of the podcast, but Joe Anhalt is with us. I thought, who better to have as the 100th episode as Joe Anhalt? You can catch him on episode, I believe, 39 and 53, but he's here for 100.
What an honor. What an honor. And congrats to you, Rich. 100 episodes. I feel like you need to take a photo like Will Chamberlain with the 100-point game and post it on Instagram.
Also, that's not a bad idea. I should do that.
Have you noticed that even if you don't score 100 points, you still can do this? Like Devin Booker did it when he hit 80. And then who's the dude from the Celtics that just like scored 60 and tied a franchise record? And he did it like with the Will Chamberlain. Yeah. And I'm like,
oh, that seems kind of cheap though.
Yeah. I mean, I get the 80, like 80 is pretty remarkable. 60, I guess it's just because it's a franchise high and it ties Larry Bird, but I feel like it should be at least like 70, 80, like 60. I feel like it's just too, not that it's, an easy feat to achieve, but
I mean, 100 is 100.
100 is 100.
That's three digits.
Yeah. If you're scoring 100 these days, you better be,
All right. So describe your living situation of 2020. You're now back in New York. What do you miss most, or what do you like most about being back? And did anything surprise you?
Mm-hmm. So when COVID hit in March, I obviously didn't know what the heck was going on, like most people. And the thought of being stuck in downtown Manhattan in my tiny one bedroom just wasn't super exciting. And so I got out of there as quickly as I could and went to Chicago. So the silver lining of the pandemic, or one of them for me, was being able to go back to Chicago and essentially move in with my long distance girlfriend and spend a lot of time and get very close with her. So we went from long distance relationship, New York to Chicago, to living together in Chicago, and it made us stronger. It was really great to have somebody to go through that experience with. Obviously, times were tough, but having somebody to be there literally all day every day was nice. February of this year. I guess like March through like July, I was basically in Chicago, and then after July, I was going back and forth between Chicago and New York. And February of this year, I convinced Kylie to move back to New York, which is where we first met, and started a relationship. And so now we're back in New York full time, but in Brooklyn. So I was in Manhattan, I'm in Brooklyn, and it's great. I love being back. Even during a pandemic, there was a different level of energies between New York and Chicago, and you could feel it. Obviously New York wasn't the exact same pandemic versus pre-pandemic, but you could still feel a shift of energy.
Okay.
Again, coming from like Chicago to New York, and when I came back, it was just like this wave flowing over me again, and it was almost like moving to New York for a second time. I got like jittery and excited, and also doing it with my girlfriend. That's a huge step, moving cross country. It wasn't a new place for either of us. She had lived here for 5 years. I've been here for 3 years now. Officially joining our lives together, and it was great. It was pretty funny. A few things that surprised me. One was there were times, especially in February, where I wasn't spending a lot of time outside of the apartment, that I forgot I was back in New York. Just because New York is iconic for its and known for its like super small apartments, right? But the pandemic, there's been this huge move away from cities. People have been moving out to the suburbs or places like Austin or Denver or all these like second, third tier cities. And so for people in New York who've been able to stay here, you've really been able to kind of level up your living situation at such a discounted rate. So we were able to cash in on the COVID rental prices. We moved dead of winter during a pandemic and got a really amazing spot and a big place. And so that's why I still felt like I was in Chicago, because I was in this big space in New York, which is just unheard of. But now with the pandemic, it's crazy. Like, you know, all my friends, coworkers have moved, and everyone is just like leveling up their places because you're getting 3-4 months free rent and discounted monthly rents as well. So another kind of silver lining of a, you know, terrible situation. I can't, you know, overstate how terrible it's been. But if you're staying in a big city and your lease is up, you get to cash in on a really cheap and nice place, which is what we did. So that was surprising. And yeah,
so
it's crazy that.
What would you say the difference between living in Brooklyn versus Manhattan is like?
Yeah. So especially downtown Manhattan is just, it's the densest place in America by a long shot. And it's just so convenient. And Brooklyn, while it's not as dense and it's not as convenient, it's still probably second to Manhattan. So maybe there's only like one bodega on your street as opposed to 2 or 3. Maybe there's only like one pizza spot on your street, or maybe things close like an hour or 2 sooner, right? So you do get a little bit more space. It isn't as congested. Those are the big things that you immediately notice if you're, let's say, walking around downtown Manhattan, and then you go to even like a Williamsburg, which is the most gentrified at this point. But around where I live, Fort Greene, Prospect Park, downtown Brooklyn, you do have a little bit more space to breathe. Now, if you're coming from another city and you go to Brooklyn, you probably still think, wow, there's so many people, it's so dense. But again, if you're coming from Manhattan to Brooklyn,
It's all relative.
you get that. Yeah, exactly. You get more space. Your money goes a little bit farther. But some of that convenience isn't as readily available. For me, I do miss like the slice places in my spot in Chinatown, Lower East Side. I had 2 really good spots that were walking distance: Scar's Pizza and then Williamsburg Pizza. And my pizza place now is just like not as good, and also closes at like 11 p.m. on weekdays and like midnight on weekends. So
Carlita's been on this program before, and she compares Brooklyn more to Chicago than Manhattan in a way.
Yeah, I could see that. Especially the more residential neighborhoods in Brooklyn. So my new neighborhood, Fort Greene, which is really close to Clinton Hill, Bed-Stuy, downtown Brooklyn, is very residential. It's almost like, I've thought about this too. In Chicago, maybe it's like the Roscoe Village.
Okay.
So it's very residential, a lot of nice family homes, younger families, but not as stroller heavy as, let's say, like a Lincoln Park, but not as young as like a Lakeview, right? It's that good like balance of younger families, younger couples, but still like great restaurants, great bars, a really nice park that we get to walk to on a daily basis to kind of stretch our legs. It really is a great mix of all those things, and still pretty close to the city. That's the other thing about Brooklyn is it's tough if you like have friends in the city, especially like Upper East, Upper West, or like West Village. You know, it does take some time to commute there. Okay. But you know, everything has its pros and cons. We're really happy with our neighborhood. I can't recommend it, you know, enough. And I'm excited to show you around next time you're in town.
Yeah, for sure. So do you ever overhear like sports talk in New York? And what do you hear more about, the Brooklyn Nets or the New York Knicks? We got Thibodeau coaching the Knicks now, who is a former Bulls coach in the Rose years. What, you know, and we're saying this, I'm asking you this too, a day after my Milwaukee Bucks beat the Brooklyn Nets, and Giannis put up 49 points. So
I saw that. I don't like my friend group, they're not the biggest of sports fans. I do hang out and actually started like a weekly basketball run with some friends, but I'd say it's more like general NBA talk.
Okay.
But from kind of general NBA talk and even like the national consensus, it seems like the Knicks are getting more play. And I think that's just how it's going to be for a long while. The Knicks as a franchise, as a brand, have just so much more going for them.
The brand is bigger than the star power of Brooklyn individually.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, the Nets are still a relatively new team, and they really haven't had any success up until this year, right?
Yeah. Well, and the Knicks too.
Well, the Knicks have been an iconic franchise forever.
Right.
I mean, they've been shitty for a while, but at least they have. I mean, it's Madison Square Garden. It's the Knicks.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could be the worst team in the league, but like if you get courtside seats to the Knicks, I mean, that's on my bucket list, right? To like sit courtside at a Knicks game, like sitting courtside at a Nets game. Like even if you have like KD, Kyrie, you could have every A-list player in the league, but courtside Knicks, like next to Spike Lee, I mean, that's just so much cooler than Barclays and Brooklyn. And they just haven't had the tenure. They don't have the history yet like the Knicks do. So and as much as I want to like the Nets, and I live a 15-minute walk from Barclays, it's still like MSG, man. It's iconic. I mean, that's where every NBA player shows up to play his best game. And I think if the Nets do pull off the championship this year or next, it's going to do a little bit for the franchise, but it's going to take decades for them to even compete with the Knicks on, let's say, like a brand level and just like the cool factor. Like the Knicks are just.
It's almost the exact same of like Clippers, Lakers in a way.
Yeah. But even more so because what's crazy about that is the Clippers and Lakers play in the same arena.
That's true.
So that's kind of crazy that the Lakers are so far ahead of the Clippers. But I mean, also the Lakers are just dominant in terms of championships, trophies, and star power. The Knicks, they really don't dominate in terms of trophies or success, but they just dominate in that brand value and in like the coolness. And I can't underscore that enough. Like Spike, courtside, the history, the tradition. Even like people coming in there and playing their best games, like MJ dropping the double nickel, even like James Harden dropping 60 plus. What was that last year, the year before? Everyone just shows up. It really is. I'd say that and Staples, right, is the premier arena, and everyone wants to show up there.
Yeah. And everybody wants to be seen there and stuff. Yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah. Again, like courtside Knicks, like that's for sure a bucket list.
So now that spring's kind of coming into bloom here, is there something that excites you?
Oh, so much excites me. I mean, I feel like everyone is just excited to pop off this spring, summer, right? I mean, roaring 20s, especially New York City. I mean, if you're not excited to get out and try to establish a sense of normalcy and be with your friends and family and just be out and about and enjoy the simple things in life. And this past weekend was probably my most normal weekend since the pandemic, where I wasn't like doing a road trip or something with friends. And it was just like went for a bike ride in Prospect Park, went to the farmer's market, went to the park with a group of friends. And we just like sat there and just stayed there way too long. And then kind of meandered about back to Brooklyn and caught up for dinner, like next to the park, sat outside. And it was just like, I'm just excited for those moments. And I think everyone else is, right? I don't think there's anything different about me being in New York than you being in Chicago or somebody else being in rural America. They're excited just to have spring and summer in those moments. And when you're outside too, you don't see the masks as often. You don't see the social distancing as often. So there is more normalcy to it. And I remember feeling that back last year, spring, summer. So I'm just excited for that. And New York too is just I feel like there's everyone keeps talking about this pent up demand, this pent up energy, and you can really feel that vibrate across Brooklyn, Manhattan, whatever borough you're in. You can definitely feel it, and people are excited for this spring and summer.
Yeah. Do you think the way you said the word normal, do you think the word normal, it's like on its own, does it take on like a new connotation, the way like the pound sign became the hashtag and it like represents or it's like something else now in people's heads? Do you think the word normal ever like changes the meaning of the word?
Yeah, I think people are definitely going to think about it in a different light. That's for sure. And what they think of normal. And I imagine people's new definition of normal will be a very basic version, right? It'll be very much just kind of back to basics of let's just have a conversation, or let's meet inside, or let's grab coffee. And everyone's definition of normal has been shook. It'll be interesting to see how long that lasts, this kind of new wave of normal. But I think it's definitely just normal is just appreciating the simpler things in life, and doing those mundane things that we all took for granted, and now that's the new normal. It'll be interesting to see how long that lasts. That when people say normal, it comes with so much more weight, and we'll see how long that weight stays on people's shoulders. I think people will be able to shake it off quicker than we all might imagine. At least I hope so.
What type of content are you consuming lately?
What am I consuming like most of? I feel like it's been this way for a while now. It's been I'd say like Instagram for sure, and then movies. I'm a big movie guy, and especially like with Oscar season wrapping up, I was watching a lot of movies. I downloaded this app called Letterboxd, which is for like movie fans, and it basically you're able to just like, it's like a diary of all the movies you're watching, and you can review them and see what other people are watching. And there are a few podcasts that I follow. They always talk about it, and it's just fun to document things. And for some reason, the past year, I've been just getting into like documentation, whether it's using Instagram or Twitter or my own personal like notes or photos on my phone, and just documenting certain things.
Why is example, that?
I don't know. I enjoy like social media platforms like the Twitters and Instagrams of the world, because it basically forces you to create like a visual diary or a text diary. That's really what it is. And I think it's so cool to look back and see like what you were doing 6, 12 or like 5, 6 years ago, just to like reminisce and reflect. I think that's cool. And I've also been trying to be better about doing more things like analog. And so I did this, not experiment, but just maybe exercise where I've always wanted to print every photo in my iPhone for a year and put it into a book.
Oh, you've mentioned this.
Even if it's like a screenshot, just because I love, again, I'm a visual guy. I love looking through photos or videos or looking at photos or watching movies, YouTube clips, things like that. But I don't love being on a device all day, every day. And I do that, right? Because I'm a millennial. I work in e-commerce. I'm just attached to my phone and computers and things like that. So I just thought, what if I could bring the scrolling of your iPhone photos to a book or to an analog device? And so it turns out I take a lot of photos, and I'm sure everyone takes a lot of photos. So it's like thousands upon thousands of photos. Not super interesting to put into a book. So I picked my favorite photos from 2020. I think I ended up with like 250 or 300, and just put them in a book through Artifact Uprising. and just label it iPhone 2020. It actually turned out really nicely. They're like full bleed, like good quality. It looks like a coffee table book. And it's fun just to like flip through it every now and again and not have to be on a device. And yeah, it's fun. And so I want to try to do that for as long as I can. So maybe at some point, 5, 10, 20 years from now, I can show it to my kids and they're able to flip through it. And, you know, as cliche as it is, you know, what's the saying, like images, 1,000 words or something? What's the saying, Rich?
A picture says 1,000 words. A picture,
yeah, picture says
1,000 words or something. Picture says 1,000 words or something.
Yeah, something like that. So yeah, it turned out really nicely. I hope to continue doing that over the next few years. But yeah, content wise, again, like I'm just always on Instagram, like all day, every day, and like I think most people are, and then movies as well, mainly in part to Letterbox, and just documenting that, and it's fun. Yeah, and not much else going on during the pandemic.
So you mentioned Instagram. Joe's Instagram is like one of the most tasteful accounts that I follow. It's very like intentional, and it looks aesthetically pleasing. It has a certain like what do you call it? Certain composition to the photos and the colors. And you mentioned, like, the last time we were together, you mentioned something that was really interesting. And while everybody wants their accounts to have a lot of followers, what you said you're doing is you're kind of what is it? Pillaging? No, purging. You're purging followers.
Yeah.
So you're becoming more exclusive into who you let into your life, or is able to see your life and what you're doing. Can you elaborate more on that for listeners and viewers?
Yeah, happy to. And first, thank you. I appreciate that. I've definitely come a long way. And I'm sure everyone could do this too. If you look back to the start of Instagram, everyone's using these like really cheesy filters with like overexposure and these like oblique angles and like just like cliche Instagram 101. And yeah, I just archived those. So I still have them and I still go back and look at them all the time, but not to like my public profile. I'd say the past like few years, I've tried to, and it's interesting. I feel like I'm always talking about like analog life versus digital life. And in my like real analog physical life, I think it was like 2014 or 15. I think we were still living together, Rich, on Byron. I read Marie Kondo's Life-Changing Magic, Tidying Up, whatever that book is. And she talks about, basically kind of purging your life's material possessions and only holding on to those things that bring you joy. And so using that as just like a very simple framework, I've tried to apply that to my digital life as well. And one of the first places I wanted to do that is my social media accounts. And especially like LinkedIn is a great example. Like when that platform was like coming out and you're like a young professional trying to like figure out what you're doing, and you just like linked in with like these random people, and you haven't spoken to them in like 5+ years, like you probably don't need to be connected to them on LinkedIn, right? So just like if you haven't spoken to them in like multiple years, or if you have a closet full of clothes and you haven't worn that in a year or two, chances are you probably don't need to have that item in your closet. Same thing, chances are you don't need to be connected to that person on LinkedIn. And just because it's not taking up physical space, you can see the physical changes in your closet, in your home. It still feels good, like to unfollow people on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, and just kind of do a little spring cleaning, do some tidying up. It's been great. And I've been doing that every now and again. And I come to find myself just on random nights scrolling through Instagram and seeing who am I following and who's following me, and do I really want to interact with this person's content? Is it bringing me value? If not, then I'll unfollow them, or I'll choose for them to unfollow me. And I turn to a private account just because, again, like I just like want to know the people who I'm following and who are following me. And also I feel like that's also my personality. Like I know by this point, you know, I'm like 32 years old, like I am an introvert at heart, and just being wide open digitally just like doesn't really match my personality. And so I feel like I'm getting closer to who I really am in the real world on my like digital profiles. And so it's been a little bit of soul searching and trying to better showcase who I am in the real world on the digital world, which I obviously don't think I do very well at all, because my like Instagram feed, as you alluded to, is like super curated and like very artsy and fartsy. But if you get to know me, you know that I'm, you know, very casual, very laid back. I'm always joking around, never really take things too seriously. But if you were to see my Instagram profile, you would think the exact opposite. So, but I also don't think Instagram is like the best way to showcase that. Anyway, yeah, I just love the idea of a spring cleaning and applying that digitally and doing a digital spring clean, and just being a bit more thoughtful as to who you're following, who's following you, is it bringing value? And I know there are a lot of people out there who have befriended strangers on the internet and have built fruitful and long-lasting relationships. But if I'm not going to do that in the real world, doing it online, I'm just not going to do that either. I'm just, again, if I'm at a party by myself, it's hard for me to walk up to people and introduce myself. And I'm probably not going to do that in a digital realm either. So yeah, it's been a shift for the past few years, but I really liked it. It's been a fun exercise, and yeah, I encourage all the readers, all the listeners to do a little digital spring cleaning themselves and see what happens.
Yeah. I know you've been a big Apple supporter for a long while, but you don't use their software. How do you how do you go about like choosing the software or the apps that you use? And is there any software or apps that you use most at home and work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Apple is by far the best like hardware company out there. Like they are a product like company. Like, yeah, if you think about all their product releases back to when Steve Jobs was still around, it was always a new physical hardware device, whether it was the iPad, the iPhone. These days, like they just relaunched like new iMacs, things like that. Like they're physical products, right? They have industrial designers. You know, Johnny Ive was a staple there for his design, and it was primarily product design. And I think they put more time, effort, resources into product design as opposed to software design. And so I do think that other firms out there, particularly Google, who are hard software companies, are better at it than Apple, because they were started as a software company. Google started as a search software, and then they got into Gmail, and now they're into G Suite, which I happen to love. And I think it's a superior product than Apple's Pages or whatever their spreadsheet is. I have no idea. But Microsoft Excel is just miles ahead of Apple. And also when I was starting out in my career, and I've just always worked for early stage startups. And the software tool for early stage startups is the G Suite, is Gmail, is Google Docs, is even like Google Slides and things like that. So my professional life, my personal life runs on Google software, but on an Apple device, the iPhone, which is one of the, I think, cleanest and best designed products that is and has been ever created. And it's pretty crazy how successful the iPhone has been from its start, and continues to be It really is crazy. But yeah, I've been an Apple fanboy, and I really only use, in terms of like Apple software, I use iMessage just because you kind of have to. I use Notes, the weather app, love their weather app. And then kind of their photos, but honestly, I do tend to use Google Photos more. And then, yeah, for all my other software, it's Gmail, Chrome, Google Maps. I mean, Google Maps is also like 10x better than Apple Maps.
Yeah, for sure.
Even though I have heard that it's gotten better, I just have been using Google Maps for my entire life, so I'm not going to switch over at this point. Obviously, Google Search, the cloud. I primarily use.
Do you use iCloud?
I do, but just to back up all my like iMessages and photos. That's pretty much it. Everything, every time, like when I start a new document, whether it's like a Word doc or a spreadsheet, I'll just go into Google Drive and just start doing it from there. And then I use the Drive app on my phone too.
How do you're talking about documentation and stuff before. How do you, something I'm thinking about and trying to organize is the digital organization of files in my life. Like, you could have like a physical copy, although that's not kind of a rare thing now, but I'm paranoid. Like I'll use an external hard drive and then I want to put it somewhere on the cloud. I want like multiple sources of where everything is, but then it's like, oh, that one's updated, but I forgot to do that one. And do you have any strategy for how you go about organizing digitally?
Yeah, well, my digital assets, files, whatever, much more simpler than yours, because you pretty much like a media agency at this point. With your podcast, your videos, and everything else. So I imagine you have to pay for iCloud or Google storage, and back up everything there, and then have your own external hard drives. And that's what I remember when I was taking a lot more like photography. Obviously, takes up a lot of space, and I had an external, and this was before I'd say mass adoption of like iCloud and Google Drive, and I lost my external and just like crushed me. And so that's kind of what I guess inspired me to get iCloud, so I could back up all my photos. But most of the assets and media that I care about are photos that I take, which are backed up on iCloud now and Google storage. So I pay for both of those monthly fees. But I don't have anything external. It really is in the cloud, but it updates, I think, on a daily basis. I have an update. But yeah, for like media agencies and moguls such as yourself, I imagine that's a tricky process, but and probably an expensive one. Maybe it's getting expensive for like hosting and like media storage through. Do you use iCloud or Google?
Let's see. I have Dropbox, iCloud.
Okay.
I do have a Google one, but I might have to increase it soon. That's why I'm trying to figure all this out. And then in the fall, I upgraded. I bought 2 external hard drives. One's filling up very quickly. It's just a lot of stuff.
Data storage, it's no joke. I can't imagine like what I think people who like create TV shows or movies and like how they store all those files and things like that. Those are like massive files. But it is interesting. It really is like library of information, right? And how do you document things and categorize things? And also the naming of files. Like, do you have a specific way you name your files? I know a lot of art directors and designers do this with their different variations, but do you have a system in place of naming all of your content and files?
Sort of. I'm becoming more and more aware of the benefit of doing it. But it could always get better. Like that's not something I'm good at. Like with my personality and stuff, organization is not great. But I just know in my head where where things are going through like all these rabbit holes of folders.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it could get better.
It's
So
a lot of
I'm
work.
curious about that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I had more experience in that, but
And that's something
my
too, where it's, go ahead.
no, you just have a much more complicated library of content than I do.
It's stuff like that too. It's so important, but when you're doing it, it feels like you're just wasting your time because there's no like concrete like
Yeah.
effect of your work in a way. And so it's like, I'd rather spend my time doing this rather than like organizing all my files so that it's clear and ready to go for anybody's use. And yeah.
But I feel like that's kind of like the process, like athletes always talk about practicing or like
Yeah.
loving the process. Like I feel like that's part of the process of becoming a pro, right? That like separates you from the wannabe podcasters, the wannabe YouTube people, right? It's those small things, it's those day-to-day things
Yeah.
that do set you apart. And that's something that I've been trying to apply in my professional life with my team, is like doing those things
Mhm.
that make you feel and look like a professional, right? It's almost kind of like faking it until you make it. And I feel like that's a good example of like
Yeah.
just executing the process of like naming the files, organization. Again, like that's not going to show up in the stat sheet, but maybe that's going to separate you from, again, all these wannabe podcasters, these wannabe YouTubers, which I think you do so well in so many other areas with your YouTube channel and your podcast. Like I can see the professionalism improve almost on a weekly basis. But it really is that process and those like nitty-gritty details that no one wants to do, but it shows up in the long run, I feel.
Yeah, the process.
Trust the process.
We talked about it on this podcast before. Nick Saban has been a big influence on me recently, and like that's his entire thing is the process.
I think I listened to that pod. Was it Saban and Pete Carroll?
Yeah.
It's a good one. What one was that? Well, shout out for the readers.
Somewhere in the 70s, probably. Episodes in the 70s.
Got it.
Yeah, I don't have it memorized on me. It's you can find it in YouTube too under the books section. Yeah, the process. Is there something culturally that you're like overhearing on the ground, or some of the maybe like circles you're in or people you follow on Twitter that you think will pick up like nationally and become more of a trend or something bigger?
So there's two things that I thought about. One is a little weird, but something that I've been talking about with my friends and a few colleagues, and I think it's safe to say that gay culture is now mainstream culture.
Gay culture is mainstream culture.
Yeah, and even like last week, I don't know if you saw this, but one of the former bachelors, Colton Underwood, came out as gay.
Okay.
And it really just didn't make that many waves in kind of the in the social spheres. And also I feel like gay sassy Instagram celebrities, like everyone likes them. It's not just females anymore. It's masculine males who can not only relate but enjoy that type of content and that type of media. One of my friends in New York, he is now like this huge Instagram celebrity. He's called Slutty Puffin, and he just comments on like the Oscars and different TV shows and just kind of his life. And he's this very flamboyant gay guy, but appeals to a wider audience. And it's just not as taboo as it once was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but you're starting to see it come into mainstream culture, I'd say even more now. And with the rise of transgender and all these even more niche movements, like being gay, being lesbian, being bi, it just doesn't turn as many heads anymore, right? It's not as progressive. And I was listening to a podcast last week. Bowen Yang and Matt Rogers. Bowen's on SNL, and one of his best friends, Matt, they had this podcast called Las Culturistas, and they kind of said a similar anecdote about how they're just like, oh, like we're just gay, but like that doesn't like really mean anything anymore, right? The kind of stereotypical gay person that was on like a Glee type of show like 5-7 years ago, that's just kind of like baseline these days. I think that's a great thing. I think that shows we're progressing. I think people are more open-minded, and now we're seeing a lot of like the taboo conversations are moving to transgender, which it seems like those conversations are eerily similar to what we were talking about with the gay community 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I think it's going to follow a similar path. We just don't know we're scared of what we don't know and what we don't understand. And a lot of people don't know and don't understand the transgender movement. I mean, me personally, I'm still trying to understand and wrap my head around it, but I feel and see a lot of similarities to gay culture and to gay America. And I think it's going to follow a similar trajectory, but I think it's great because I was raised in a dominantly like female household who loves theater and thespians and gay culture, and I've just always gravitated towards that and to that humor, whether it was The Birdcage with Robin Williams or more recently with like Schitt's Creek. Like the main character on that, he identifies as, I think, pansexual. So basically, I think his famous quote in Schitt's Creek is, "He likes the wine, not the label." And he Dan Levy is gay, and he just did this movie like Happiest Season with Kristen Stewart, who's bisexual. Kate McKinnon, I'm a huge fan of. She's gay on SNL. Bowen Yang is also an SNL guy who's also gay. And I just feel like gay culture is now mainstream, and I love it. And I think we're all here for it. I think everyone's a little gay, and embracing their gayness is a good thing. Yeah,
for sure. Switching gears a little bit, at the end of last year, you were out in Arizona. Can you describe that trip and what you learned from it, whether it's, learn about yourself or learn about the great land of Arizona?
And I actually remember I went down there with Kylie for New Year's. We just needed to get out of Chicago and wanted some sun, and I love the desert. And I just love finding like random remote places, and Airbnb is a great tool for that, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So we found this like cute little bungalow, like studio, 1-bedroom-ish apartment, not apartment, but like house in Oracle, Arizona. Shout out to Oracle. Oracle is actually, I don't even think it's a town anymore. It's about 45 minutes northeast of Tucson, Arizona. So we flew into Tucson, rented a car, and drove there. And it was the best vacation of my life. And I remember.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I remember talking to Kylie like after this was over. I was like, that was like the best vacation I've ever been on. And I'm sure a lot of it had to do with, it was like the first vacation during COVID. And it was everything that I wanted. I selfishly planned a lot of it. But it was, it was everything I wanted. It was in the Southwest in the desert. So the climate was great. It was like 55, 60 and sunny every day. we woke up with the sun. We made breakfast with, like fresh ingredients, and got this amazing, like green salsa from like a dingy Mexican spot, like right where we landed. We went on a hike each day. We went to Saguaro National Park, which is beautiful. There was a state park about 5 minutes away. We like walked around the town. I'm making air quotes because it was just like this, like, I think maybe there were like 2,200 people, maybe less. But there was like a local cafe that we went to a couple times. And at night we cooked every meal. We made some really, really good food. But we had this like, just like beautiful kind of schedule. We'd get up again, make breakfast, go for a hike or do an exercise, come back for a late lunch, have like a cocktail, maybe play cards or listen to music and watch the sunset over the mountains. And then we'd prep dinner, cook dinner, clean, and then go to bed early and do the same thing for the next day, and did that for 4 or 5 days. And it was great. It wasn't too short. It wasn't too long. And it was perfect. And it was just so simple. It was almost like camping. Like when you're camping and hiking, your life becomes very simple, right? It's basically get up, make breakfast, take down camp, hike, have lunch, set up camp when you find your campsite, make dinner, and enjoy like the outdoors. So we were doing all that, but we just didn't have to set up camp every night. And we had the luxury, I say luxury, but it was, nothing fancy. It was the Airbnb itself wasn't anything fancy. It reminded me of like if a old retired academic like professor were to have like a cottage in a random part of Arizona, like this is where they would be. It was promoted as a like a mindfulness kind of retreat. If you're looking to like get away from the hustle and bustle of the city, go stay at this Airbnb, and it was exactly that. And so, yeah, it was perfect. It was everything I wanted. It was just us two. And again, maybe take it with a grain of salt because it was like the first vacation during quarantine, during the pandemic, but it was perfect. And also one other thing I should point out is we did do a little bougie experience. It wasn't all like rustic hiking and cottage Airbnb. We did like nice massages on New Year's at a nearby hotel, and so that was like really nice. And like, yeah, we got like massages and had some cocktails and like some snacks to do like a little high low. I'm into these like high low moments of like, oh, let's have like a really nice bottle of wine, but then like order pizza from like Joe's Pizza or something like that, right? Like let's go hiking and stay at this like really rustic Airbnb, but then like get like really nice massages and treatments one night. It was a simple vacation, but it was great. And me, I just like love sitting there and like looking out into vast spaces, and I did that for like 3-4 days straight. And I can't recommend it enough. That was my Arizona, Oracle, Arizona. Again, shout out Oracle, Arizona.
You see a lot of stars out there?
Oh yeah.
In the sky? Yeah.
There were a couple overcast nights, unfortunately, but it was beautiful. Can't recommend enough. And trying to figure out how we can get back out to Arizona or New Mexico or Utah. Utah's another place that I really love. It was great.
Yeah, it sounds very enjoyable.
Yeah.
So we're here on the 100th episode of the podcast, which I guess is somewhat, of an early milestone to go from 0 to 100.
Is this
in the time
now where I can ask you some questions and turn the tables? Yeah.
Well, so I have this Radio DePaul mug. Joe and I used to be co-hosts of a show called The Afternoon Snack with Rich and Joe. And it's my mom calling me.
Do we have a caller on the podcast?
I'm supposed to go up to Wisconsin and tomorrow help out on the farm a little bit, but it might be a little rainy. So we're we're feeling it out.
Got it.
Back to the afternoon snack with Rich and Joe. We used to have this show where we'd play songs from whatever decade. We kind of like come in talking about our weekend, what song kind of embodies your last week. And we would have certain sections like Bieber Talk and Would You Rather, just staples of the show. And
Yeah.
I'm curious what recently would be the song that you would play to like embody the last week or month or even maybe the last year.
Yeah. I more recent. I was introduced to this like French, like new wave disco soul funk band by actually an old friend of mine from the DePaul days, Brandon Loro. Maybe you met him. He was an old DMAC guy. But he came over and we kind of had like a mini reunion, him, Brandon, and then Kevin Tracy. And he introduced me to this, cool French group called, what's the name of them? Panche, Panache. But they came out with an EP that's like super funky and fun. I feel like you would really dig them, Rich.
I'm really into like new disco. Psychedelic disco is a genre that I've seen. Yeah.
But like sexy French girl singing and dancing, and just like as soon as you turn it on, you just like start vibing and like
what's it called? Pants?
I'm probably butchering the name because I'm a white guy from the Midwest. Panche, Panache. Panache. That's it. I didn't see the other C there. But I would play something from them for sure. Just like, I feel like that'd be right up the afternoon snack alley too. I feel like we were always playing like more like poppy and like fun and
upbeat.
Just like feel good music. Yeah, upbeat. And they have like a cool album art as well. It's like,
I'm looking at the pink,
and like really abstract and just funky. And I've been listening to that. I think it's only an EP, so I'm really excited for like the full album to come out. But it's just a nice little quick hit. And as soon as you turn it on at a party or even just like with a small group of friends, you're just gonna like start vibing really, really quickly. Yeah,
lately, well, I'm a big Miami horror. I got really into Tame Impala this early year.
Yeah,
I listened to the Slow Rush like every day. I bought it on vinyl, so now I listen to it on vinyl too. Now that like summer's coming up, Poolside is great. Parcells a little bit. I'm looking at my Justina Wynn, who was on the show recently. A lot of music I get from her. We kind of have similar tastes in music, and she DJs. So she's very specific in her like curation of her sets and everything. And she introduced me to Polo and Pan, La Imperatrice. It's like a French group, house kind of vibey. I love a lot of their songs. It's really cool. I'd play one of those then. So
nice.
Bieber Talk.
Honestly,
I mean,
what?
Go ahead.
No, it's just crazy that he's still so relevant. Like he
was so big though.
He was, and he still is. Like with his new stuff. I mean, I kind of dig it. Like
I really haven't listened to much of his new stuff at all.
It's catchy. It's great pop songs like Peaches. I think that's the name of it. Like really catchy, really good pop tune, and he sounds good too. Like I feel like his voice has gotten a little bit better, and he's gotten more sure of himself and like his tone and his range. He like knows what works and what doesn't work. And he's married now. He
can you think about this? We were doing the show as college kids. We were like 22. We're 21, 22. We're talking about this like 16-year-old who's coming up. So every week we're doing Bieber Talk, like what's going on with like this phenomenon that's Justin Bieber, right? So we're growing. And can you imagine, like, he's married before both of us. He's like, you know, it's just so interesting.
It's also crazy that we actually did. I mean, it wasn't like a pre-programmed thing. Like one day we just started talking about it, and then the next week we talked about it, and then just kind of naturally became a thing that was just kind of like an inside joke.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just kind of grew with it and went with it. But yeah, he's just as relevant today as he was 10 years ago. So props to him and his team for staying relevant and turning out like good hits. Like I don't think he'd be as relevant if people didn't like his music. And I know like the pop industry like shoves music down people's throats, but there have been a lot of people that have come and gone, and he's stuck with it. So shout out to Justin Bieber, longtime listener of the Afternoon Snack, and I'm sure he transitioned into rich conversations.
Yes, I'm sure he has. So we used to do the segment called Would You Rather. And so I have a question for you. A would you rather question.
You have a would you rather?
Yeah. Would you rather experience life on this like social distancing, masks, everything on lockdown, then it's not on lockdown type of thing for the next 5 years, but you get to host Saturday Night Live after those 5 years, or you have to move out of New York and you cannot visit New York for the next 10 years?
I have to move out of New York and I can't visit for 10 years.
Yeah.
Whew, this is a good one. I can tell some thought went into this. I mean, I have to go with the. That's so selfish though. Like if I choose, like we have to be socially distanced for 5 years, just so I can fulfill my dream as a SNL host. I mean, that's the one that I want to say, but it's terrible for me to say because that means we have to like live with this for the next 5 years. But like no one would like die, right, from like COVID. We would just have to like live socially distanced and things like that, right?
Right. Let's do that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like that's probably the truth. Like I would do that and then be able to host SNL.
Nice.
That's the dream. It's crazy how that's like the literal dream. Like I've had dreams where I've hosted SNL.
Wow.
And I like freak out because I forget my monologue or like I miss a beat or a thing.
Yeah.
But what's crazy is those dreams have been so what's it called when they're like so real, like a lucid dream?
Okay.
Right? Is that sure. Like what it's called?
I hear like lucid dreams thrown around, but I don't know exactly what that means.
Okay.
I don't remember my dreams much, or I don't dream much, sort of.
Every now and again I remember them, but I know I've remembered like I've had a couple. I wouldn't call it a reoccurring, but I've definitely dreamt about being at SNL and hosting it to a point where I've woken up and the memories and the feelings of hosting have felt so real that I like in my mind, like I've had those feelings before. So like I know what it like feels like.
Wow.
Because I've like mentally experienced it, but not physically. So not to go down like a crazy rabbit hole, but like if you dream something so vividly and you have feelings of having done that, like, because that's like really like what an experience is just like the feeling of it. But like if you can mentally experience something, like do you physically need to? Right. So kind of like virtual reality or like Total Recall, you know, pick your metaphor or pick your whatever, your sci-fi fantasy, which is crazy to think about. Like, do I need to like host SNL if I've like kind of like not done it, but like I've felt that like in my dreams. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously I would love to do it. So that would be, I'd want to host it. But have you ever like dreamt something and it felt so real that you now have a feeling, you know what that feels like because your mind tricked you into that experience or tricked you into that?
I don't know. I don't have a lot of dreams when I sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. We just don't
and I
remember
don't
them,
really remember
right?
them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have dreams about dinosaurs every April, which is strange. Ever since I was a kid, I've had like
Every April?
dreams with dinosaurs in them, often nightmares, uh, since I was a kid, every April. I don't know why.
Whoa.
Yeah. Something actually, I was looking at something the other day, and there are a few things we still don't know as humans. We don't know why we dream, and like if there's
Yeah.
any meaning behind them. We also don't know why we need sleep. We know we need it, but we don't actually know why we need
Why?
it. Yeah. So we haven't figured out those specific two questions yet.
So why we need sleep seems like a big question. I feel like we would have figured that out by now.
You would think this is like the $1 trillion idea, or if it can be executed or something. We spend on average like 8 hours of sleep in a day,
Yeah.
8 hours sleeping, right?
Yeah.
So then over a lifetime, say 90 years, that's 30 years.
Yeah.
What if you can produce the effects of sleeping, but condense the amount of time?
Yeah. To like 10, 15 minutes.
So like whether it's one of
Yeah.
those like cryogenic like things that you go into, or I don't
Yeah.
like a pill, or I don't know, but I mean that's
Yeah.
something that would change
Interesting.
humanity.
If you're able to solve that problem, you're essentially adding 30 years to your life.
Exactly.
Which is crazy. I think a lot more people are figuring out how to stop aging. From what I've been reading, I think a lot of the tech bros, people out in SF, are trying to figure out aging and a cure for it.
Biotech revolutions, that's what's
Yeah.
happening now. You know, we're getting beyond the point of wars and disease and famine. Now we want to live healthier, longer, happier, healthier,
Yeah.
longer, happier. Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather?
Okay.
I wrote it down. Okay. Would you rather only be able to listen to the Beatles forever,
Okay.
no other music?
Okay.
Or only be able to read books that you've already read? So you couldn't read new books and you couldn't listen to any new music besides the Beatles.
Okay, so I could only listen to the Beatles, or I couldn't read any new books.
Yeah.
I'll go with the Beatles for sure. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I probably listen to the Beatles. It's probably like over 50% of the music I listen to anyways.
Got it.
Why do I need to listen to new music when I can just listen to the greatest band of all time? All the time.
Fair. That's fair.
But I want to keep gaining knowledge through books. I haven't read enough books to be satisfied yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a lot easier than I thought. When I wrote that, when I wrote that down, I thought it was a lot more. It was going to be a lot more challenging. Also, when you framed the segment to the listeners, you made it seem like we came up with the concept of like a would you rather. You're like, oh, we did this segment called Would You Rather. It's more so we just asked would you rather questions.
Right.
It wasn't this like this unique.
I have this groundbreaking idea. It's called Would You
I'm gonna
Rather.
Ask you, would you rather do this or would you rather do that? We're gonna call it the Would You Rather segment. It worked though. It was fun.
It was fun. It was fun. Yeah. So this is the 100th episode. Do you have any questions for me?
Yes, Rich. First and foremost, again, congratulations on triple digits. A feat to be celebrated and applauded, and have some whiskey and a cigar tonight. or tomorrow, whenever you can.
I'm going to be in Miami when this episode releases. So I will have a cigar and some drinks then.
Maybe a Cubano sandwich or something, tacos, burritos, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear what's one surprising thing that you've learned about the podcast industry through your first 100 episodes?
The podcast industry,
or just podcasting.
It's such a big industry now, like over $1 billion. There's something for everybody there. And I feel like it's more of a like relationship industry. I've known like, for me, listening to podcasts in the past, I developed like a sense of, I develop like a relationship with the host, even though like they don't know me.
Yep.
But every time I play an episode, their voice just like soothes me and I feel relieved and like, oh, this is so great. And there's so many different formats, and everybody now, it's you have this $1 billion industry, but the barrier to entry is low. So anybody can join. So you have, like a mom who's interested in like crafts and hobbies, and she can start a podcast, or you have the New York Times and huge Fortune 500 companies, media companies, they have their own thing, celebrities, athletes. So it has this platform, and people can find whatever they want specifically. And there's all different like types. There's like infinite options. So for like me, because people have all these ideas about podcasts and like, oh, what are you going to do to monetize it and stuff? And it's like, that's not what I'm doing here. I kind of model what I'm doing off of just like the podcast that I like. So, like a Tim Ferriss, or like I'll take like interviews and kind of interviews and do it similar to like Tim Ferriss, but I'll structure it in a way like Bill Simmons, and then I'll use this from Dan Patrick. So all like my favorite influences, I can like put them all together to create my own one. And I think that, and then that like from the feedback I've got, people like the like small and like snackable ones.
Yeah, I do.
So there's something for everybody, and everybody kind of finds their thing. I think the barrier. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think the biggest point is you figured out, which is, I think in hindsight makes so much sense and obvious, but obviously you doing it on a weekly basis, figuring out that it really is creating, cultivating, and building a rich relationship with your listeners. And yeah, that makes perfect sense. If you think of like radio and some of the oldest and most memorable disc jockeys, you really did feel like they were talking to you, right? Because you didn't have the visual aid of, even when you watch talking heads on whether it's like ESPN or like an HBO weekly series like Don Oliver Tonight, and you also hear the audience or the laugh track, right? So there isn't as much as that one-to-one, or even if it's like there is no audience and they're still just talking to you, you still just don't feel it. It's just something different to have like somebody in your ears, and you feel like they're talking to you, and that's like such a valuable relationship. And with the podcast that I listen to on a consistent basis, I do feel like I know these people. Obviously, like I know you extremely well, but I feel like I know you even more after listening to your podcast. And that's so powerful and makes so much sense.
I think something I found is that it's helped me also kind of explore what I'm interested in. I'm interested in so many different things. And I think that's what's, with podcasts, there's so many different kinds, and it's like some are like super niche and very specific. So people go to that for that specific information.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of like, I don't want to say like games. No, not that. But it's like, for me, I'm using it in a way to express myself and learn more and grow. And it takes longer to kind of build that when I'm not focused on one particular category, because I just want to do what interests me. And it's really, for me, a platform to just explore. But when I look back at the episodes, I can kind of see a pattern within these and what the groove that these are all kind of falling into. So it's kind of surprising to see, where I think it's like it's so general because they're all kind of over the place. But when I look at it, to me, there is a pattern. I don't know if other people see it that way, because one day we'll talk about we'll have Carolina George, who's a young adult author, on, and then the next time we'll be talking about the Global Cities Index and things like that. I just it's been a lot of fun to explore that. And sometimes it'll be like, I don't know if this fits on, it's something I'm just thinking about recently. And it's like, why not? Why not record? Just put it on. Why not?
Yeah.
See what happens.
No, that's great. That's great. And I mean, I'm sure, and you kind of alluded to this, but I'm sure you've grown tremendously over these 100 episodes. And that was kind of my second question is, personally, like, what is there something that you've been surprised to learn about yourself, whether it's, we were talking about this earlier, but the reinforcing and understanding that you really don't like the nitty gritty weeds of like organization of the data and the files, or something even something larger that was an aha moment. What personally have you learned about yourself?
I would say, going back to that a little bit, it's like, I do see what I'm interested in most. I don't see it sometimes big picture wise. It's like, oh, I'm really interested in this lately, and I want to learn more about that. So I do something on that. But then when you look at the aggregate on the platform, okay, that's kind of what that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in, with the like kind of nitty gritty. Let's see. I would say, so like learning more about seeing what I'm interested in most and just exploring that. The consistency, I would say, like, I'm pretty critical of myself, and like, to me, like 100's cool, but like, if we're talking thousands, then like 100, what does 100 mean? But I think you learn a lot and grow. And even with COVID, here's the thing.
Break it down.
I don't know how much of my growth is the podcast itself, or like everything else. Everything else I'm doing, and COVID accelerating so much of what I'm doing, so we start the podcast. You were the first podcast, like 53, where we decided to put like just a camera. Let's put a camera on it, right? And then so now we have this visual component. It used to be, we would just go to like coffee shops with Chicagoans, and it would just be me and the person just sitting across from each other with the mics. Then I edit it and then put it up. And then COVID, now you have Zoom. So now everybody's more comfortable using like remote, but I still love that in person. So then it's like, okay, let's just put a lot of the podcasts I like, I'll watch some of the stuff on YouTube. If there's a visual component, I think makes it just a little bit more interesting, even if it's just like one camera. So then we try that.
Absolutely.
Well, then it's like, well, what if we add another one? Or what if we add another one? Well, now we got a whole lighting setup, and we have 3 DSLRs, and then now we're producing someone else's podcast because they see what we do. And it's just like this, it's just, I don't know how much of it is the podcast specifically or just like everything else that I'm doing, and the just reveals itself sometimes on the podcast. If that makes any sense. I think it's such an easy thing to do or break into, but do you continue? Like, do you have, do you go through that process of getting better and doing it? And, people are always obsessed about numbers. People focus too much on where they are now and comparing themselves to whatever. You're going to compare yourself to a podcast that's been out for like 3 years. Like, why would you do that? So when people want to know the numbers of the podcast, I'm like, I don't even care about the numbers of the podcast. Because to me, am I getting better? And are the numbers growing? Yes and yes.
That's
so
all that
why,
matters,
nothing else really matters. And everything, a lot of it is like tied up with people's idea of money. I think a lot of people will want to get into podcasting or whatever it may be because they want to monetize right away. And they saw someone else do it on this website and they give you the step-by-step of like how to do it and everything. But I think most importantly is the product itself and the relationships that you have with your audience and your listeners. And I don't think that can really be forced. It has to like be earned and grow over time. And I think something that I'm trying to work on is consistency and being more consistent with the episodes and what days they come out and then what type of content comes out on different days. If I'm trying to monetize it right away or something like that, like some things you don't do for the money, you do it because you want to do it. And if you want to do it, then you will do what it takes to keep doing it and enjoying it and grow it. And most of the things that I do, including the podcast, are all like long-term moves, not really short-term. So it's more about creating an infrastructure, and when stuff happens, it will happen. And in the meantime, just keep doing your thing.
Yeah. And I've appreciated that as I've been listening from day one, is you truly are trying to see what works and trying all different angles and concepts. And it's clear that you are fine tuning the product, and the product for this is a podcast, right?
Yeah. And
how can you start monetizing something if you don't really know what that something is just yet, if you don't know what that product is? And so I love your approach to that, and I wish more people would take that approach to not just podcasting, but any project that they're starting out. Don't be afraid to like just start and see what happens. You can always change it. Nothing's going to be perfect from the get-go. And so applaud you again for putting stuff out there and being consistent with it, because sooner or later something's going to hit and you're going to find your niche, and you're going to look at the data and you're going to look at the podcast and be like, oh, I really like this one. Or you can see like which ones your listeners are gravitating towards to most, and improve from there and only get better. So
some of the stuff is so like interesting too, to see like, oh, That's interesting. People listen the most on Spotify, yet when I listen to podcasts, it's Apple Podcasts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it's like overwhelmingly more Spotify, and just like all
Yeah.
these little things, and like, oh, that episode did that or that, it's
hmm
just it's so interesting. It's so fun too.
What's
Really enjoyed it.
we can cut this out if you don't want to reveal, but what's the most listened to podcast of the 100?
I actually don't know.
Oh, that's cool.
It's
So
been a while since I looked at.
You weren't lying when you said you didn't care about the listeners or didn't care about the numbers.
Yeah, I know on YouTube, my friend Felipe came on, and he's like the
Yeah.
4th most watched video on YouTube.
hmm
And I was like, I tell him, I joke with him. So I go, Felipe, so you're oh no, he surpassed her. I was like, my most popular episodes on YouTube are you and then Kat Kennedy from NASA. So it's you and someone from NASA that are
Nice.
top 2. But so it's, this is the podcast, and then YouTube is like a whole different ball game. And
Oh, I bet.
it's just like,
Yeah.
so I have this motto in my head, and that's attack the learning curve. So something that prevents people from starting is they have this idea of like, oh, this is gonna be so hard. I know nothing about it, but I got nothing to do during COVID. So I just,
hmm
I got to figure it out. Right. So and it's just like, just feeling like an idiot every day, and like being uncomfortable, feeling like a dummy, but you just have to keep learning about how to do all these different things. So attack the learning curve is kind of what I think about a lot.
Yeah, that resonates with me. I've been wanting to start executing and just putting out more like creative work. And in Chicago, I was heavily involved with like improv and that scene, and that like really helped me flex my creative muscles. And you always want to, obviously, like, it doesn't matter if you're an artist, photographer, musician, improv, podcaster, you always obviously want to be better, right? But you only get better by you get a lot better by just doing it and just learning from your mistakes. And it's really hard to come to terms with like being bad and then learning from that, right?
You have to be humble and kind of remove your ego from it and approach it, objectively.
And and for those people that can be bad unapologetically and know that they're going to improve and know that it's just part of getting better, and just kind of taking it as just understanding it's all part of the process, and kind of leaning it into that, and like embracing the bad, embracing the scrappiness, and embracing the growth and the beginning stages, which is really, really hard to do. I think it's easier as you get older because you've lived through some shit, right? And you have some more experience and you're wiser. But it still is a challenge. But again, props for you to making it to 100 episodes, because I bet you feel a hell of a lot more confident and have learned a shit ton in these first 100. And here's to another 100 and 1,000.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on and being the 100th episode. Appreciate you.
Sure what I'm doing. Raise the roof. It's terrible. Appreciate you, man. I'll see you next time.
Yep.